Okay. Selection tool for remediation options to be used in phase 3 remediation assessment. Okay, content of this presentation. I will first go through the content of table of model 6. Then I have a slide why we should focus on the removal of pure hazardous waste, the pure POPs. Then I go into details on the remediation assessment process. Then I give some instructions of the selection tool, introduction of the selection tool, introduction of the multi-criteria decision analysis, and then I give a presentation on the summary of the task and deliverable of phase 1, 2, and 3, and then I end with a flowchart of phase 3. And here, the content of this model is focused on this process, phase 3, the site remediation assessment. The table of content of model number 6, available on the website of the Stockholm Convention, is first the introduction. Then we have an inventory of a PCB soil and groundwater remediation technology. And why only PCB? Because all the technologies are being discussed in model 5, and here we take as an example a PCB contaminated site. And PCB is a POP used in an electrical instrument for controlling the temperature. Polychlorinated hydrocarbon biphenyl, that's the abbreviation. But I'm pretty sure that your people will know PCB. PCB is in Annex B of the Stockholm Convention. It's an industrial POP. Maybe find confirmation if the trainees understand PCB. Translator, please. Yeah, they understand? Okay. I assume they understand.
I agree with you, Mr. Fogg. All of them has to know the PCB, for sure.
Yeah, okay. So in the example, the PCB is the contaminant of concern. I will go into the selected remediation technology for PCB contaminated soil, and I do the same for the PCB contaminated groundwater in model number 6, in the second paragraph. Yeah. Then in the third section, I give the selection tool and to discuss the selection tool. Then in section number 4, I go into more details how to select the best remedial option. And then section number 5 is the example. The example is the remediation of a site in Serbia which was contaminated with PCB, and they were producing radiators there and were using PCB. And then the last section is the input of the terms of reference for the remediation for the radiator site. So here are what do you need finally to come to a contract to remediate the site. Then I would like to direct you to the chapter of the references, which contains references that can be consulted, and appendices. Appendix 1 is the selection tool for soil. Appendix 2 is the selection tool for contaminated groundwater. And then as an example, I have given 4 cost estimates of this example. And 3 cost estimates, one of the maximum remedial option, one of the minimum remedial option, and one of the interim remedial option. So you can consult it and see how you have to make such cost estimates. But first, why do we focus on the removal of pure POPs? Or you can also read, why do we focus on the removal of pure hazardous waste? Why is that? If you come to the site, the first thing you do is focus on the hazardous waste and the pure POPs. And I give you with this slide, I want to illustrate why you should do that. This is a drum with any hazardous waste. So this is a drum with hazardous waste. For instance, PCB containing oil. To remove and to treat this will cost you 2 to 3 euros per kilogram. That's more or less the cost nowadays of treating pure waste. It's a lot of money. You don't have that. So you have no money to take this drum away and bring it to an incinerator to treat. So you leave it. What happens? Your drum gets rusted. And while it gets rusted, it starts leaking. You get a spill on the surface, but it drains and it infiltrates into the soil. So you get a soil contamination with the product from this drum. To get away the same amount, so the same kilogram, which was first in a drum, but now spread over a volume of soil, in concentrations here around 1000 milligram per kilogram, will cost you a 10-fold of the cost of the removal of the drum. So you increase your price for cleaning the site with a 10-fold by not taking away the drums, but leaving it. And still you have, of course, you have limited resources. You have no money to take away the topsoil. And the process of migration, fate and transport, as I earlier discussed in my lecture, continues, and you are contaminating the subsoil. Concentrations are being lower. In this blue line, you see also it reduced risk when the risks are going to be reduced because it's in the subsoil. Here on top you have high risks, but if you want to take out the same kilogram of material, it will cost you 10 to 100 times more than removing the drum, because you have to deep digger. You cannot take everything. You have to install in situ remediation or whatever. So still you leave it, and unfortunately the contaminant reaches the groundwater. To take away the same kilogram from your groundwater is in cost 1,000 times to even 2,000 times more expensive than taking away the drums. And here this yellow or orange square gives an impression of the risk increasing, because if you have a groundwater, you may contaminate your resources of sweet water for drinking. So the message of this slide is do everything which is possible to save cost and reduce the risk by removing directly these hazardous waste before it starts entering into the soil, because cleaning is then just even to 1,000-fold increasing the price. Is that clear? I think this message is an important message for your strategy of cleaning sites. Introduction to the selection tool. The selection tool, which is given in the appendices of this module, facilitates the selection of in situ, ex situ, and off-site remediation technologies for contaminated soil. And it does the same for the groundwater. Yeah, okay. As you should be aware of the product in the vessel. Let me go back to you know what product it is. It can be PCB oil. So PCB and oil should be then the components to be analyzed. So you install wells which are reaching the groundwater, and then you analyze for PCB and oil. And PCB is maybe expensive, so you may use as a tracer oil. And then later, when you have, let's say, mapped the plume, you can then take some representative soil samples to get the full scope of the contaminants of concern. The selection of the remediation technology is actually the first step of the remediation assessment, phase 3. And generally, no single technology can remediate an entire site. And often sites are often contaminated with multiple contaminants. My example, PCB and oil. Separate treatments or remediation technology usually combined at such sites to form what is known as a treatment train. And the picture of my last presentation was a picture of a treatment train. The selection tool for soil has the following 4 steps. Selection of a technique based solely on the soil permeability. The second step is the selection of a technique based solely on the concentration in the soil. Step 3 of this tool is the selection of the technique based solely on the current and future use of the site and its surrounding. And the very last step in this selection tool, which I will present, is the availability of the techniques in the country. Then we come to the selection tool for the groundwater. This selection tool has 5 steps. First is the permeability for the aquifer. Then the second step is selection of the technique based solely on the groundwater depth. Third step is the selection of the technique based solely on the concentration. The fourth step is the selection of a technique based solely on A, the groundwater use on-site, and B, off-site. And 5 is again the last selection step, which is the selection of a technique based solely on the commercial status of the technique, so the availability in the country. So the selection tool is separate in soil, the selection tool for the techniques for soil and for groundwater. What do we use? The approach is such that the applicability in the first 3 steps for soil and the first 4 steps for groundwater of the screening is divided in the following 4 classes. Very good, can be applied without further lab or pilot testing, and thus symbolized with the green color here, this one. Moderate applicable, can be applied but should be tested before full-scale application, and this is symbolized with a light green here. So we do not know, we're not sure, but it could be. And then we come to the 3rd class, limited applicability. It is most likely not applicable, but should be tested in a lab first and followed by pilot study to prove that it's applicable before full-scale application, and this is symbolized with the orange or yellow. Okay, the picture is yellow, I should have made it orange. And then we come to non-applicable, so it's surely not applicable, and then it's symbolized with the red color. Then we come to the last step, and there the color is also used, the color scheme is also used, the same color. Several suppliers are on the market, and this is symbolized with green. A few suppliers are on the market, light green. One supplier, orange or yellow. No suppliers, red. So when there is no supplier, you cannot implement it. And that seems not logical, but it happens because there are many techniques, let's say, described, but they are not in operational and they are not on the market available. They are all in testing status. So this is what we use in the tool to classify the techniques. When a certain technology is classified as very good, applicable, green, when it has in all steps, in the first 3 steps, green for soil and groundwater, and for groundwater in the four steps, the last steps direct the user of this screening tool to techniques that can be certainly applied in the country. Okay, when a certain technology has the lowest score, moderately applicable, so light green in one of the first 3 steps for soil. So the first step can be green, the second step can be green, but the third step is light green. Then in one of the first steps is light green. The last step of the tool directs the user to techniques that should be tested first. And based on the test result, it can be decided to apply this technique full scale. So if in one of these steps you have light green, you test it and see if it's large scale applicable. Now we come to the limited applicability, orange or yellow. In one of the first steps for soil and or the first 4 steps for groundwater, the selected technique in the last step will be applied full scale only when test labs indicate that the technique works and pilot test has demonstrated that the technique is applicable. So here it's recommended to do lab testing, bench scale testing, and a pilot before putting your money into a full-scale application. Now, and it's very clear when one of the steps is red, you should not consider, although it may be one, the others may all be green, but when one is red, you stop. When in the first steps of soil and the first 4 steps of groundwater, a certain technology is classified as very good applicable, moderately applicable, the question is, what innovative techniques are used to remediate soil and groundwater, and of what components?
So I intervene. Yeah. The question is what the techniques that are used to control the like nanotechnology. So if you have any examples of nanotechnologies to control the PAPs.
That was discussed that is discussed in Model 5, and one of the innovative techniques is the bioremediation. I showed you the example of a pilot testing in China, and nowadays there are several bioremediation techniques developed based on bench scale testing and field trials. For instance, in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, the university in Tajikistan, in Bishkek, is already far developing strains of bacteria to be used to break down POPs. So that is quite new and innovative. Her name is Tina Tin, and there is reference made in the guidance to these techniques. Other techniques are sonic that I will, if time allows, I can just go through the document of the Model 5 where all the techniques are being discussed. And I did purposely not do that because it takes time and it is very specialistic. Thus I only have discussed in general. Oil drilling is, of course, has its own specific techniques, but a lot of, let's say, the techniques for drilling are copied and used in soil remediation. But as soil remediation is, of course, not that deep as you need for oil drilling, we have mechanical drilling rigs which are smaller and mobiler than the drilling rigs used for oil drilling. That's number one. And of course, the techniques for cleaning, especially oil contamination, is limited to bioremediation, depending on the concentration. If you have soil which is very contaminated, it can be toxic. If you have moderate to slightly contaminated soil, bioremediation and phytoremediation may be applicable. Does it answer the question?
Thank you.
Okay. The outcome of the selection tool should always be tested or always be confirmed by a remediation specialist. Now, these are the symbols used in the tool to illustrate the different techniques in the tool. And mind you, you can add, it's just an Excel tool, so you can change these techniques. But we have now introduced in this tool in situ thermal, ex situ thermal, and so on. And it's all illustrated by these pictograms, and these pictograms are explained here. For instance, this is in situ bioremediation, is illustrated by an eating pigman, and ex situ biodegradation is illustrated by a depot. Now, here, ex situ phytoremediation is illustrated by grass, in situ is illustrated by a leaf, and so on. So these pictograms are used in the tool. I told you that we're using a traffic light, green, go ahead, moderate, wait, test. Here, extensive testing, no way, stop. Now we go to the tool, and I just wanted to direct you to this remark. Reference number in the top right corner of the tool, of the cell, provides you the explanation of a specific applicability class or color. So we give the colors, but we give also the motivation why. So let me go to, I'll only show you one tool. So I have to change, wait a minute, please. Tell me when you see the tool.
We see.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Now, this is the tool. Here I have the classes on top, and I will enlarge it a bit. And this is available on the website. So clay. And as I said, the first step is the soil composition, the permeability. So clay is not permeable. So let's go to biological. Here, you see, this is the biological, the pictogram. And it's red. Why is red? Here, number 6. Number 6, application of necessary amendment, moisture and nutrients through the whole contaminated part of the soil in situ is very difficult. So that's the reason why we said don't do it. So in short sentence, we have motivate our color. For instance, clay, and we go to number 1, light green. Number 1, technical visible needs to be tested before full-scale application. So it's visible, but needs to be tested. Now, and here, 4, that's sandy clay. So the technique of sandy clay is for no technical limitations. And on this, we have what is being tested. So here, the PCB contaminated site, the soil, and these are this is what you have to fill in yourself. And then here you see applicable. And then we go to step number, you bring only the green ones. You see, here is the score of the first step. And here we have already some red. And in this step, the concentration is being tackled. Now, I will just go through this, the bioremediation for concentration. When here this is red, soil mixed with waste. Now I'll go to the motivation, number 13. High concentration are toxic for the plant. That's the motivation why we have said it's red. Now, in this way you can continue. Then we go to the third step. We repeat the classification. So we see now where the red ones are. And here again, red and green. And this is the site use, applicable. And then we come to the last step. And here is the score. And then this is, I will make it a bit larger. So ex situ thermal is not possible because we had a red score. Thermal desorption should be tested. Land farming is okay. Bio beds is okay. In situ is not okay. And here, this is in situ chemical oxidation, ex situ physical and chemical could be, but should be tested. And this is then for the 100 cubic meters PCB contaminated soil. This is for the other site components, and this is for the other site components. I think it's, let's say, it looks complicated, but it is not. And it gives you an aid of selecting the remediation technology based on simple motivations. Toxicity, the concentration, the permeability, land use, and the last step is what is in the country. So this is in the case of the example in the country available. Try for yourself. It's explained in the guidance to use this, but this is just an introduction. So we have this for soil and we have this for groundwater. Are there questions?
I don't see any question, Mr. Fogg, but I will say that if they have, they can write and I will keep for you for tomorrow. Not we are too late.
Yeah. So these tables or this Excel are in Excel to be downloaded and can be used, and you can change it yourself. Okay, I'll go back to the presentation. So the same we have for groundwater. If you design a remediation, you have to get the best remediation option. And the aspects to be considered is risk reduction, environmental merits, cost, technical feasibility, planning, risk factors, and social impact. These are the aspects to be considered to have a sustainable remediation. And the best remedial option reduces all environmental risks, so human health, ecological, and migration, has the least remaining risk, can be implemented with the best environmental merits, not entailing excessive costs, applicable with allocated resources, I should actually better say available resources, involves a sustainable approach, must balance between social, environmental, and financial aspects, while considering scientific evidence and good governance. When comparing remedial options, environmental factors such as resource use, emission cost of the options should be considered. These are cost calculations of a maximum option, a minimum option, and intermediate options. And this is your multi-criterion decision analysis. I will go to it. Tell me when you see it.
We see it. We see.
Now, this is the scoring, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the aspects. I will make it a bit bigger. The maximum, the minimum, and the intermediate option. So risk reduction, remaining risk, on-site and surrounding, and you score. In the guidance are giving as a scale what is best. So what should have 5. And here it is shortcut. So it gives you give a score 1 when there is strong negative deviation from your objective. You give it a score 2, not in compliance with your objective. You give it a score 3, almost in compliance. You give it a score 4, in compliance with the objective, and 5 when you have compliance with the objective and additional benefits. You do that on all these 7 aspects, and you can of course divide this aspect in. So here are these are the the remediation options, and here is the scoring and the total scoring. And from all the aspects, you add them, and the last one, you get the overall score. And here you see that this one, the maximum option, has the highest score. So for this soil, we select the highest score. And here is the explanation of the scoring given. Have a look at it. It's extensive, but also here in Excel to be downloaded and to be changed to your convenience. But this is just an example of a method how to select the best remedial option. I told you that, let me show you quickly. I'm nearly ending. And this is an example of a cost calculation, so you can consult it. This is the cost calculation of a maximum remedial option, so you can consult how to do this. Okay? Now, the complicated process of selecting a remedial option is being illustrated with this diagram. This is my toolbox of my techniques available as being explained in Model 5. So here are all the techniques. These are my site components. In this case, we have a pesticide stockpile in a bunker. We have slightly contaminated soil, moderately contaminated soil, and strongly contaminated soil. This blue arrow illustrates the screening tool I just explained. And then you select based on your screening, for instance, ex situ thermal treatment for the maximum option, in situ physical chemical degradation for the moderately contaminated soil for the maximum option. In situ biodegradation is selected with the tool for the slightly contaminated soil. Disposal is selected for the stockpile with pesticides. And here is your maximum option. Then we come to the minimum option for the selection tool for the minimum option, we have temporary storage. For the minimum option, for the slightly contaminated soil, we have in situ containment by phytotechnology. For the moderate contaminated soil, in situ containment, the same. And here, for the strongly contaminated soil, ex situ containment. This is the minimum option. This will be on the short term the cheapest option. This, the maximum option, is on the long term the most expensive. On the short term, sorry. On the long term, this may turn out to be more expensive because if you have containments and phytoremediation and here containment of the strongly contaminated soil, you need monitoring and aftercare forever. Now, if you have designed this, you take the components from this maximum and minimum option and you design intermediate option, B, C, D. And then you subject the designed remedial options to this multi-criterion decision analysis. And you score, and with the scoring, you get the best option. Is this clear?
I think this is very important and very clear. Because as it's so important, I want that all the participants have the clear idea about this. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Any questions on this? Because we have 3 slides more and then it's finished. Okay. So this is a summary of the deliverable of phase 1, 2, and 3. I showed you earlier this part, but now we come to the next part, the phase number 3, and the repackaging plan, the combination plan of the building, excavation plan of the pit, and the soil and groundwater remediation plan, describing the best remedial options which has been selected by this method. So here, the best option is then being designed here in the remediation plan. The remediation plan is the description of the selection and the more detailed description of the selected one. And here, this is then illustrating the output and input. So phase 1, initial conceptual site model, first risk assessment, input of phase 2, gap analysis, detailed conceptual site model, risk assessment, the input of phase number 3 we discussed now, selection remediation technique for each site component, conceptual design remedial option describing the feasible remediation measures for all site components, selection of the best remedial options, and here again, conceptual model, the site conceptual model is being completed by information gathered during this phase, and then you preliminary design the best remedial options, and this goes to the next phase. This is the process. Select pre-designed remedial option, all technical issues covered, yes. Detailed design, yes. All technical options are all technical issues are covered here. No. Additional survey, update conceptual site model, yes. Tender remediation campaign, tender successfully, no. Go back for a new selection, yes. Proceed to number 4. Thank you very much. Sorry for the hour I used, the extra hour I used, but I think now we are back on track.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fogg. It was very clear. I suppose all the participants that are remaining, that are almost all at the start, so I am very happy that all the people, even if we are more than 1 hour and 20 minutes late, they remained. So the topic was very important for them. This means here at this slide, you have the email for Mr. Fogg, so budwin.fogg@gmail.com. So if you have any questions on this, you can approach him directly. For example, if not, tomorrow you can ask also the questions when we'll do the wrap-up and closure session. Don't worry about this. Always willing to help and to provide all the information.